Have you ever wondered which places are tough for Americans to visit in 2024? In this video, we'll explore the 10 countries where Americans are not welcome, learn about the complexities and risks involved in traveling to these destinations. If you're planning an international trip, this is a must-watch. And don't forget to subscribe and click the bell icon for more travel insights. Number 10. Bhutan. This beautiful Himalayan kingdom is a tricky country to visit for Americans in particular in 2024. Because of its policies regarding tourism that are put in place to protect their culture and their land. It follows the high-value, low-impact tourism model where tourists are charged between USD 200 and USD 250 per day. This fee includes 3-star hotel costs, meals, a licensed guide, transportation in Bhutan, trekking gears for the campers, and a tourist royalty fee that supports free education and health services throughout the country. Nevertheless, given the costs that are associated with the trips, the beauty of the locations, and the immensely deep culture of Bhutan makes it even more alluring. Tiger's Nest Monastery built on the cliff, and amazing Bhutanese dances and music fest plays Bhutan like no other destination can. Thimphu is a city with contemporary structures side by side with traditional Bhutanese houses, while the Phobjika Valley remains virtually unspoiled and is one of the few known habitats of the black-necked cranes. Visa acquisition is an easy process, but the traveler is expected to use a licensed Bhutanese tour operator or a partner company in the foreign country. Self-drive tourism is prohibited so that those tourists visiting the country will participate in the circulation of the nation's economy and also abide by the laws of the country. This system maintains Bhutan's cultural and environmental stability and sustainability. Bhutan's policy of allowing only visits that have been paid for and guided can be a drawback for any traveler who is not willing to go through the process of paying $250 a day for touring. But for any traveler who is willing to go through the process, Bhutan is a warm and fascinating country. However, the need to have an organized tour and the high daily rate imply that it is ideal for those travelers who want to have a highly cultural and environmentally friendly experience. Number 9. Myanmar. There is another country where Americans may feel it rather impracticable to travel to in 2024. This is Myanmar, or Burma, as it is also called. The country has been under this condition since the military coup in February 2021 that resulted in continuous protests, civil unrest, and restrictions on the people by the military. Currently, the U.S. Department of State has put out a Level 4 do not travel warning regarding Myanmar because of the unrest, military fighting, and safety risks. When the ordinary American thinks of Myanmar, the only thing that comes to his or her mind is that the country is filled with violent civil unrest, arbitrary detentions, and even violent crimes. The U.S. Embassy in Myanmar is under high security measures to protect the embassy, as well as it provides service with limitations when there are U.S. citizens in distress. Applying and obtaining a visa to Myanmar as a citizen of America has become a complicated affair, with many visa requests being put on hold or declined in the recent past because of political instabilities. Despite this, it would take a lot of effort to secure a visa, and when on the ground, the situation is very unpredictable. It is very militarized, and there is a constant conflict between the military and many different ethnic insurgent factions. This is especially true in major cities such as Yangon and Mandalay. The situation in the rural areas is even more dangerous. Internet blackouts and limitation of communication make it even more difficult to plan the trip and ensure the safety. Myanmar, endowed with a well-cultured history and beautiful geography, would have been a dream for any tourist if it were not for its current political and economic conditions. However, the high level of security risks and the antagonistic attitude towards the foreigners, especially the ones from the Western countries, visitors cannot be assured of their safety or security while at the place in question. Number 8. Libya. In 2024, one of the most risky and dangerous countries for Americans to visit remains Libya. The country has been experiencing conflict for many years after the civil war in 2011 and the fall of Muammar Gaddafi. Since then, however, Libya has seen continued violence, political unrest, and the presences of multiple armed militias. Currently, the U.S. Department of State has warned its citizens against traveling to Libya owing to the high risk of crime, terrorism, kidnappings, and armed conflicts. The advisory it has given is a do not travel. The very idea of visiting Libya is associated with major perils for Americans. Absence of central authority and political instability due to factions that have emerged to fight for power makes security a volatile issue. The U.S. mission in Libya, specifically the U.S. Embassy in Tripoli, closed in 2014 2014, and there is little consular assistance for US nationals in the country. Applying for a visa to Libya is a difficult and frequently useless procedure, as the country's security situation does not allow for the issuance of visas to many people. For instance, even if one is able to secure the visa, the physical situation remains harsh and unforgiving. The militias are known to engage in deadly battles often, and there are always accounts of foreigners being attacked. Places such as Tripoli and Benghazi are very dangerous, and eruptions in other parts of the country can be said to be very risky. The possibility of being in an area where two or more sides will be fighting, being kidnapped or captured by gunmen, or being a target of a terrorist attack is a real possibility. If it were not for the civil war and current troubling situation, Libya, with its history and archaeological treasures, Leptis Magna, and Serene, is a country that would attract many tourists. However, the high levels of insecurity and the negative attitude towards foreigners, especially those from the Western world, makes it difficult for the American tourists to indulge in the activity. Number 7. Afghanistan. In 2024, Afghanistan remains a risky destination for American tourists, with constant conflicts and violence. Afghanistan is considered unsafe for tourists because of terrorism, kidnapping, and armed conflict, according to the US Department of State. In the same respect, there are no reliable infrastructures and medical facilities, which makes it hard to travel. It has a very vibrant cultural and physical beauty, but the insecurity situation makes it a very insecure place to visit for the American tourists. Also, the political environment is insecure in Afghanistan due to power struggle and instability of the government, which increases the threat to foreigners. Humanitarian conditions also remain dire, with many parts of the world experiencing high levels of poverty and inadequate access to basic needs. For those who still planning to visit Afghanistan, it is advisable to regularly check the current status of travel warnings and always have a backup plan. The process of getting a visa and having to move around with bodyguards makes it very hard to visit this country. Afghanistan has always been a land of various civilizations and empires, which has left its imprint on the country's culture. The country has many archaeological sites, centers of ancient trade, and historical monuments, including the Buddhas of Bamiyan and the city of Herat. However, many of these sites have been destroyed or are still located in the conflict-affected areas. Afghanistan is also endowed with natural resources such as mountainous regions, valleys, and deserts that are attractive to tourists who like to have an adventure. Number 6. Turkmenistan. Turkmenistan is a Central Asian country that has large desert territories and many ancient ruins, which makes it rather difficult for the Americans to visit in 2024. This is a country that has some of the most difficult visa regulations. Applying for a visa is difficult and at times very time-consuming. Americans are required to obtain a letter of invitation from a state-approved travel agency, and it is nearly impossible to travel independently. Visitors have to stick to group sightseeing for the duration of their trip. In the same regard, there is a requirement for the travelers to report to the State Migration Service within the next 3 days of travel, which creates more formalities. However, there are certain difficulties that include restricted accessibility to the internet and certain websites, lack of guides who speak foreign languages fluently, and so on. Turkmenistan has many appealing sites of touristic interest, including the historical city of Merv, the beautiful Karakum Desert, and the popular Door to Hell at the crater of a burning gas. As we have seen, Turkmenistan imposes strict travel restrictions, formalities, and the government is generally wary of foreign tourists, especially American citizens, which makes Turkmenistan a rather difficult country to visit in 2024. The lack of diplomatic relations between the two countries and the few agreements only make the matter worse because there is little consular protection of Americans in Turkmenistan. Number 5. Syria. Despite the change in the leadership of Syria, it still presents a significant risk for the American tourists in the year 2024. The Syrian civil war that started in 2011 has led to several cases of violence and terrorism and humanitarian disasters. The United States Department of State has currently placed a travel warning that advises citizens against traveling to the country due to the ever-present danger of acts of terrorism, civil unrest, kidnap for ransom, and armed violence. Applying for a Syrian visa is very difficult, I can attest to that. Syrians who have lost their embassy in Washington, D.C. in 2014 must apply through third countries where the Syrian embassy is functional, an alteration that makes travel a hassle. However, even after getting a visa, the dangers that are awaiting the person in most cases are very high. Some of the major cities and historical sites in Syria are Damascus, Aleppo, Palmyra, and many more where major devastation has occurred, and due to the ongoing conflicts, these places remain highly unsafe. A variety of areas in Syria are governed by the Syrian government, and this is often unpredictable that results in regular fighting and insecurity. Americans and other foreigners may be at a higher risk from violence and hostility, as there is always a possibility of attacks being directed towards Western nationals. There remains little reliable medical and emergency aid to assist in avoiding these and other dangers, which makes it extremely hard to guarantee safety during a visit. Number 4. Cuba. Some of the reasons are political relations between the two countries that have not normalized, and the existing travel bans affecting Cuba as a destination for American tourists in 2024. The Cuban embargo by the United States, referred to as El Bloqueo, does not permit tourism, but travel under certain permitted categories inclusive of, but not limited to, bona fide direct family members' visits, journalist reporting, professional research, religious missions, performances, and education. Currently, to travel to Cuba, an American has to fit in any of these categories, and in possession of a Cuban tourist card or visa, which are mostly arranged by the flight companies. This may be cumbersome. Travelers have to make sure they record all their activities to the letter to avoid breaching any American laws. The most frequently used category is support for the Cuban people. The activities that a visitor has to undertake must encourage people's independent actions and civil society in Cuba. This might include renting a house, a room, or any other type of house from a private owner, taking a meal in private business-owned restaurants, and doing business with private business people who own market. All the same, Cuba has not lost its charm. The country has diverse culture, beautiful cities, particularly Havana, and beautiful scenery to offer the adventurous travelers. African-flavored music and dance, rich Spanish and Caribbean architecture, and historical buildings are some of the attractions to expect on the island. However, the infrastructure-related issues and the general risk of limited access to decent healthcare and emergency services at any given time pose additional layers of difficulty to any journey. Furthermore, it is crucial for Americans to know that Cuba has strict rules and legal procedures, especially because of the history and the current conditions of the relations between the two countries. The people are friendly and receptive to tourists, but being in a politically sensitive area due to the embargo between America and Cuba and the Cuban policies towards its citizens, there may be unpredictable situations. Number 3. Yemen. Americans may find Yemen somewhat welcoming, though the reception might feel less than enthusiastic. The country has been at war since the year 2015, and this has escalated into a humanitarian crisis of unprecedented proportion. When thinking of visiting Yemen, the Americans are shocked by the civil unrest, terrorism, and armed conflict. The U.S. State Department could not be any more explicit with the do not travel guidance they offer. How to get a visa to the United States as an American? Good luck. These factors, including Yemen's visa requirements and overall security situation, are designed to almost preclude any form of tourism that isn't extremely casual. In the event that one scored a passport to it, you would not have a good holiday because of the hostility towards Americans because of perceived complicity in the war and drone attacks. The pre-existing cultural and historical tourist attractions like the Sanaya city and the Socotra archipelago are now marred with severe risks. It is interesting to note that the infrastructure of the country is in a very poor state, let alone basic necessities such as healthcare. The current war has led to the loss of many historical buildings and archaeological sites, and therefore traveling is not only unsafe but also problematic. The security situation has greatly deteriorated, and most of the humanitarian aid workers are at high risk of being attacked, with most foreign nationals being evacuated. It is a convoluted and dangerous route that requires crossing borders and passing through well-guarded checkpoint and territories dominated by different factions. Number 2. Iran. Currently, Iran as a historical and cultural country poses considerable difficulties for Americans to travel in 2024 because of political situation and requirements to visas. The U.S. State Department has put out a level 4 travel advisory, do not travel, due to the following reasons. Arbitrary arrest, harassment, and tensions between the U.S. and Iran are high. It is extremely challenging to get a visa for Iran if you are an American citizen, and you have to arrange a tour with an officially sanctioned travel company. It is forbidden for Americans to travel on their own. Only an organized tour accompanied by an authorized guide is permitted. Visa application entails an itinerary that must be followed. One has to undergo screening, and it may take up to several months to be granted a visa. Still, even with a visa, one feels a certain degree of restriction when traveling around Iran. People need to plan their trip, and there are not many opportunities for discovering something interesting on their own. The political situation remains sensitive, and visitors should tread carefully, failure to which they will be liable to strict compliance of laws and/or customs of the country. Still, it is a country that boasts of fascinating sites like the Persepolis, the beautiful mosques in Isfahan, and the colorful bazaars in Tehran. Despite the hardships of circumventing travel bans, the warmth and friendliness of Iranian people, as well as the country's historic and cultural appeal, make the journey worthwhile. Number 1. North Korea. The Democratic People's Republic of Korea, better known as North Korea, is one of the trickiest and most hazardous locations for Americans to visit in 2024. North Korea has been considered very dangerous and unsafe for Americans to travel to due to risk factors such as arbitrary detention, long-term imprisonments, and no diplomatic relations. For anyone who wants to visit North Korea, one needs to get a special validation passport from the US Department of State, but such passports are given rarely and only for certain reasons like journalism or humanitarian aid work. Individual travel is not allowed. All the travelers have to form groups accompanied by their guides who are recommended by the state agencies and minders who follow the tourists all the time. The issue of extreme risk is well illustrated by the fatal story of Otto Warmbier, an American student who was arrested in North Korea in January 2016 and later died in a US hospital after being released back to the US in a comatose state. One cannot consider North Korea as a friendly country to Americans and foreigners generally due to the unfriendly political environment and strict laws governing foreign visitors. However, the country remains a destination for tourism due to historical and cultural attractions, including the capital city of Pyongyang, the demilitarized zone, and monuments of the state's leadership. Despite the charms held by the country, the harsh limitations and even certain risks outweigh its benefits. And don't forget to subscribe and click the bell icon for more travel insights.